Katie, before we dive into the actual matchups itself, though, there was a blog post that was put up by Call of Duty League last night talking about the improvements for connectivity and servers. You read this, you digested this. Just give us some of your top line thoughts on what you saw there.
Well, I mean, it's great to see, right? Obviously, there were very clear connectivity and integrity issues with the CDL Dallas event. You saw it across a multitude of teams. You saw it with Dallas. You saw it with Seattle. You saw it with the Gorillas. You saw it with Paris. Minimum 50% of the teams at that tournament were experiencing issues with these servers. So to see them address this, they have created more servers now. So there's 9 total. And on top of that, they will have a veto system. So if both teams blind veto the same server, then CDL will pick another server for them to use, I think from 3 that were chosen, something to that effect. But I think it's what they need to do. You needed to create more servers, and you needed to show the teams and the players we're listening to you and we're understanding and taking you seriously, because a lot of times there seems to be a disconnect between issues the players are having and responses by CDL. So I'm really happy to see that they are addressing this. How it plays out in Chicago remains to be seen, but certainly steps in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just super important that these issues are being addressed. As we covered in our last show, we were pretty much, of the 3 of us, were all in agreement that while we don't want to take anything away from Florida's victory, the competitive integrity of that event was definitely in question, because a good, half the teams had definitive server connectivity issues. And that is outside of the funny posts of people moving through doors completely and just kind of rubber banding all across the map. This is serious, and it did affect people's performance. And I feel like players have been, rightfully pretty frustrated, especially depending on where they're located. As we already covered, teams might not even be together. So you might have one guy who is in LA experiencing major issues and the rest of his team isn't. Hopefully, again, we don't know, but hopefully this is a step in the right direction and at least shows players I love that more than any other esport. I think players in COD really will not put up with some of these things, and they will be very vocal about it, and they will take to social media and actually complain. And I think it's a good step that the league is actually listening.
So, Katie, admittedly, I am newer to the Call of Duty League scene, okay? Everyone knows that. But when I see this, I see that there were the home series was played in Dallas. There were concerns raised, and then there were improvements made. Now, we don't know for sure whether these improvements will be the ultimate improvements, whether that will solve every challenge. Certainly, we can see a lot more in Chicago this weekend. But if history were to repeat itself, then Call of Duty League would take actions after concerns are raised in Chicago to once again improve and fix. So you have to see this as a positive, right? This is a step, like you said, a step in the right direction. And at least Call of Duty League, and historically they have done this as well, is listening and trying to fix what the problems are.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my immediate impression here is that there's no negatives to what they're doing. Everything they've done, implementing that veto process to help the teams get some control, having more servers available, these are all positives. Do I think they can continue to iterate upon that and make it even better? Absolutely. But this is a bang-up job by CDL. I'm very happy to see that they've done this for the teams. And to your point you mentioned earlier, and I think Emily was touching on this as well, there are multiple teams whose players are now scattered. So you've had Gorillas players go home. You've had Optic players who have gone home. So a lot of them aren't centrally located in LA anymore because of those server concerns. So I think you have that aspect of it, but also you have to look at CDL and applaud them for that, because they're clearly doing what they can. But I want to see them continue to do more. I don't want to see them do this and just stop and say, that's good enough. But it's absolutely a positive. There's no negatives at all.
One thing, I did talk with a couple of people across different teams, and one thing they said was they all agreed, the ones that I talked to anyway, they all agreed that the situation was very rough a couple weeks ago. They're happy with what they're seeing here, but they also said, look, we practice on neutral servers. We practice on neutrals, right? So why not just use that method as opposed to having like worrying about how many servers there are, etc. unsure if that's going to be something that they might consider, or whether the amount of servers is going to be enough. Is 9 enough?
Well, that's going to remain to be seen. And I think Chicago will definitely be an improvement over Dallas. Is 9 enough? I don't know. But honestly, for that, I'm kind of waiting and taking a step back, waiting to see how the veto process plays out. I'm very curious about that because, again, it's kind of that blind veto. If both teams veto the same map, or the same server rather, then it's out, and then CDL picks. So I'm very interested to see about that. Neutral hosts, I mean, TBD, but I would hope as we go on they would continue to add more servers. Technically, I'm not sure really what goes into that process, but I would like to see them add more if possible.
Do you think neutral hosts would be a good idea?
I mean, potentially. I just don't ever know how they work out very well being actually neutral. If that makes sense.
Okay,
I feel like
fair
someone,
enough.
at the end of the day, someone's always going to complain about how neutral a neutral host is.
Okay, that's a fair point.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up. I think the big thing for me in terms of, I just want this to be like a first step towards continuing to improve connectivity and competitive integrity from like week to week to week. Do I think that this Chicago event is going to be like absolutely flawless across the board? No. Do I think it's going to be better than Dallas? Yes. Even just based on these issues that are being addressed going into tomorrow. That's the big thing for me. To like piggyback on what Katie said, like I don't want this to be like a stopping point where they're just like, okay, this is good enough. And additionally, I don't think the players would let them do that. So thank goodness that COD pros are willing to speak up about this kind of stuff regardless. I do think you'll always have some complaining, but at the end of the day, the big thing to me is that the league continues to move forward and improve from event to event.